Well, thanks for tuning in to Morning Live. Now, this week, Statistics South Africa revealed that unemployment figures have gone up. And linked to that is President Cyril Ramaphosa's announcement of stimulus packages that will help create jobs. Meanwhile, the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, concluded its 2018 consultation with South Africa. And that report states that while the country's economy is globally positioned, it's sophisticated and diversified, the gaps in physical infrastructure and education are stifling factors to productivity. So with us here to unpack some of this are political analyst Pooe and also Labour analyst Tony Healy. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming through and helping us join the dots here.
Good morning.
I want to start here. It's not the first time that, government has spoken about stimulus packages in order to try and address the unemployment situation. But what are we supposed to make of this? TK, I'm going to start with you. Is it just more rhetoric, or will something actually come out of this?
I think if just touch on what the IMF was actually saying, this is, I think, a 3-decade-long problem. So to have a stimulus package, but we don't even know what the details are about, kind of says to me that, listen, it's almost like a shot in the dark to say, listen, a stimulus package sounds nice, but if you don't have the details to determine as to where this money is actually going to be going, I know he spoke about infrastructure development, even spoke a bit about education, but the key thing is if we don't have the details, and by details I mean, as you know, our constitution is set up in such a way that we've got a 3-tier government. So this money has to trickle down all the way to local government. What has the AG said about local government and how it's working? So to me, it sounds nice, but until we have the details, we can't really pronounce whether it's a positive or it's a negative thing.
Tony, we talk about 3 decades here of a persisting problem, and I'm starting to wonder whether even in terms of terminology we are locating this correctly. Shouldn't we be calling it a crisis by now?
Well, definitely so. It really is a 3-decade-long national crisis. We have presently, for example, nearly 10 million unemployed. We have 4 provinces where there are more unemployed than employed. And if it wasn't for the Western Cape and Gauteng, in South Africa there'd be more unemployed than employed. So I think we need more than just the pronouncements. We've had the National Development Plan. We've had these pronouncements over time. And it really, when you have such a high unemployment rate, which if you use the expanded definition means we're closer to 40% unemployed, then, drastic situations like this require drastic solutions, and we're just not seeing those being executed.
One of the other realities that we have to contend with, though, TK, is that we know that legislation does not create jobs. So the pronouncements, and even if you come up with legislation, that isn't actually going to change the picture. You've got a manufacturing sector in this country that is only contributing about 13% of GDP, whereas it should be contributing 30% of our GDP. How do we get there? That sector has lost more than 500,000 jobs since the 90s. So what does government need to do right now in order to change the situation?
Well, I think it's always important, especially when you speak to South Africans about the economy, that, listen, the economy is a very complex thing. But there's certain things government can and should do to set the environment. And one of the things has to be that we actually need to have clarity on what we mean by policy. And by that I mean we actually at the moment, I've always made this argument, and I think other analysts have made the argument as well, that South Africa actually doesn't have an economic development trajectory. We don't have a plan. At the moment, what we do know works is you have to pick winners in industries that you know are going to get you maximum buy-in. South Africa's problem, especially unemployment, is a 2-tier problem. We've got a skilled and unskilled labor. What we really do need is to get our unskilled labor into issues of manufacturing. Now, that's going to actually bring up the tough question of saying, if you are going outside and you're competing with countries now like Rwanda, competing with other developing countries, you might have to actually make, sorry to say, deals with the devil to say, listen, we will invite you in, and we might have to, I think Mr. Healy will maybe touch on this, have to set aside certain regulations which we think are very sacrosanct to us. And I can always say this as somebody who's actually been unemployed, who actually sat down for a whole year. I can tell you, sometimes just having a job is actually better than having nothing at all. Because the key thing is we need people to be in productive areas. And that might mean we have to actually change our mentality on what we mean by a job and what we mean by a good life in South Africa. And I think until government makes those tough decisions, we're really going to be stuck in this.
Just before I come back to Tony to respond to that, when you say we don't have a plan, that's very bothersome, because we have the NDP. It's supposed to be the roadmap, the blueprint to get us to the promised land.
Look, I think I've written quite a few on the NDP. As a policy person, in policy we always say this: if you have to say what your plan is in more than 10 pages, you're basically waffling and saying nothing at all. The NDP was a glorified, empirical research project which was put together, and no one could actually put it together. If the NDP was really real, we'd have actually seen a constitutional change in how we address the provinces and the national and local government. We didn't do that. What we basically did, we took data, which everybody knows. It wasn't a mystery, all the data that was NDP. Everybody's known it for the last 3 decades. We put it together in a page of 400 pages, and we said, this is what we'd like to do. You know what happened the next day when I was working at local government in the City municipality? What they basically did in most IDPs across the country is you cut and paste from the IDP, you put in there, say we're doing an NDP, and nothing has happened post that.
Tony?
You know, there are things we can do. And as TK has said, they may not be politically popular, but we can do these things. You know, we need to deregulate our labour legislation. We need to make it much more easy for small business to do business. You know, we're a highly regularized business community. We could even, for a while, even though it's not its primary mandate, give the Reserve Bank a mandate, a growth mandate. Now, it's not its primary function, but it's been done before, and it's been done elsewhere in the world, just to kickstart the economy, because it's growth, it's economic growth that's going to help us reduce that unemployment number, which is really just going up and up and up. And the problem with these decisions is, of course, they're not politically popular, because if you deregulate our labour law environment, it's going to be unpopular with the labour federations, etc. But something has to be done, because if we continue doing what we've done in the past, we're going to continue to have 40% unemployment, as we have for many, many years.
Well, the $5 million question is, for the stimulus to actually take effect, this package, where's the money going to come from? And what about the inflationary concerns and pressures that may come along as a result of that?
Well, I think my sense is the inflationary impact may be worth absorbing if it does get people to work. I think that's what a growth strategy does for you. I think the funding is coming from what the President is doing presently, which is sourcing investment and pledges from in the international community. But there's much more than that can be done, and that's going to take years to trickle through and have a real effect on unemployment.
Well, your final word, TK?
I think there's a study which actually just came out from the World Economic Forum, which actually says going forward, 41% of jobs in South Africa are at risk from mechanization, which then speaks to the issue of what are we teaching our students in varsities and high school. I think the dream of saying everybody must go to varsity, surely now people know has to come to an end. We need more artisans. We need people who can actually think imaginatively about what the future economy is going to be like. And I think there's also the same report actually tells you which jobs are going to be leading in the next 20 years. And I think had we actually started that now, I think we would be better off in the next 20 years.
Well, and as much as I'd like to continue, we have to park it there. But thank you so much to our guests this morning, Tony Healy and TK Pooe. And of course, I want to put that question out to our viewers at home as well. What do you believe is actually holding us back here? Why are we struggling as a nation to actually put people into jobs? 30 years that we have been sitting with this problem from the 90s. So do tell us what your views are at Morning Live, and please use the hashtag Morning Live as well. And we'll take a look at some of those responses, because this is a conversation that I know we will be having much more of as perhaps the details of the stimulus package becomes known. With that, we are now going to go to your